That's what your knee was doing.
That's what everything's called. How am I doing?
Just don't drop the lights.
Oh.
Just don't pop the light. No. That comment was even better.
That seems so minute.
It's a big deal. You'd be surprised where, and then I have to.
This one,
What actually was a certain direction, because they do it as soon as you all the time. People like me to like longer or whatever. But they didn't know those. And you don't have to stop.
Right.
For me.
Oh.
She's trying to do it.
She's having a full-time person. She's like an assistant. But helps us find her way to do it. Never.
Right.
And it's split, so she does 50%.
Like, oh, we over here. I don't know if they're important, but you can do on camera.
Oh, I did too.
I haven't been there, so.
Oh, this one's not. Yes, like. Should put these straps down. You could do this one in different styles. You can make it across your shoulder. Maybe strap one. This. So this one would be a good one.
Yeah.
All that. I mean, like, he has maples and every, like, but, you know.
Yes. Who has it?
Julie's dad has like like all kinds, so if I can find a nice.
But
It's 3 inch wide. Yeah, like one by 3, right? Or, yeah.
because we couldn't find the best.
That's.
No, yeah, that's go to the structure. And it's, boss needed to do it right.
All right. Let's all stand up as half of you just sat down. Let's get things started with the word of prayer. And to lead us in prayer, I'll ask if Sister Crystal would do it for us.
Heavenly Father, thank you for this evening that you allow us all together, Lord. There is a prayer request that we're about to lift up to you, Lord, that you just deal with all as you see fit, Lord. We're so thankful to have Sister Sharon with us tonight, Lord. We just pray that you just continue to watch over her and the doctors as they try to figure out what's going on, Lord. Just keep her strong. And with Brother Dave as well, just keep them strong and those around them. We just pray that the lesson brought forth tonight, Lord, we're just able to apply it to our daily lives as we strengthen each other, Lord, and try to be a light in this community. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen. A few announcements. few things real quickly. It is a cleaning week for group 1. So there's that. Then there's we're having the gravel. It's being delivered Friday, which makes Saturday work day. It's kind of how that works. So we didn't know if it'd be this week. I thought it would probably be next week, give some more forewarning, but it is what it is. If it's here, we might as well get as many people as together as can, as many men as can be here, help shovel the load. And it's going to be, a back-breaking day a little bit. I think there's going to be a lot of heavy shoveling, but everyone chipping in should help. So that will be this Saturday. And then whatever, if we get exhausted and not everyone can be here and it's a small, whatever happens, if it doesn't get done, we can always just have another one. I guess we just don't want the gravel sitting there for too long, because once it's in place, people won't come steal it. But as long as it's in a big pile, you're just asking for people to come by and fill up the back of their truck. So that's being delivered Friday. Again, so Saturday morning will be a work day. 8 a.m. Dave texted me with his surgery, which, things kind of dragged on for so long that with just getting the ball rolling, I should say. And now that we've had the first appointment and then the surgery came not that far. And then he had another doctor's appointment today, and they set the next surgery date for next Tuesday on the 15th. So remember, Brother Dave, they'll be doing some skin grafting, trying to, make it look good, and where the skin cancer was removed from. So pray for him. His discomfort's still there, I'm sure. And, going in for surgery is going to be a big ordeal. So remember him, and remember the doctors at that time. Brother Perfecto will be here in a couple weeks, not this Sunday or the next, but the one after. He'll be here on the 20th in the afternoon. Association meeting is in less than a month now. It's 7, 8, and 9 of April. And I know there's still quite a bit to get done. So just keeping those reminders in front of us. If I know that the different meals have been kind of broken up in different groups, make sure you're communicating with your group, and it might be a good idea to have like small group texts so that everyone can kind of just make sure with the others in your group that it's all like you're all planning things out, and just making sure things are moving along. Because again, April 7, 8, 9 is going to be, we're going to turn around and we're going to be meeting here together, but with a whole bunch of other people here with us. And so we want to get ready. Besides that, Caden also had a doctor's appointment this week, and we got to meet with his gastroenterologist. And so it's just starting a long process of trying to find out what other allergies are affecting his esophagus. And so we're going to meet with the allergist. It's the next step, which we've Stephanie's talked with one before. That's how we found out about the tree nuts, but we've got to start trial and error with some other food groups, and it's going to be a long thing. So pray for him. I don't think anyone likes having to make major adjustments to your diet, and having to cut out something like gluten. That affects almost everything you're doing. And that's, I think, where we're starting is gluten and a few other things that are known to be common causes for allergies, EOE, irritants or allergies that affect people's esophagus. So keep him in your prayers. As Carissa mentioned, Sister Sharon's here tonight. We're glad she's back. But this is an ongoing serious prayer request. Some really, really big concerns for her. And I've been trying not to share too much because I don't know how much she feels comfortable with me sharing, but over the last couple of weeks, she's really struggled with a lot of things caught in her speech and cognizance wise, getting confused a lot. And it's all come on so quick. And I know people do get older and people do get forgetful, but this is like an overnight type thing where it's noticeable. And I'm terrified, and it's not happening to me. I can imagine what she feels when she's trying to remember someone's name that she's known their whole life, and it's hard. So whatever it is, I told her there's nothing to be ashamed or embarrassed about. This is not her fault, but we do need to pray that the doctors find some answers. She's got a doctor's appointment next Wednesday with, I don't know. All we can do is hope that God puts her in the right hands, just like he did Dave, just like he did Caden, just like he's done many of us. Get Sharon in the right hands where someone can figure out what's going on and figure out the cause. Because, you know, if you want to treat the symptoms, you're just going to keep treating it, and it's no fun, especially the things that they give you to treat the symptoms. But we want to find a doctor that can figure out what's going on so we can treat the cause. And whatever God has in store, we want God's will. And I know God's working right now, but we want to pray for God to work in a mighty, mighty way. Anyone else? Those are just the things that are on my heart. Anybody else have anything to add or anything to prayer request, anything on their hearts? Sharon? You are welcome. Anybody else? One thing I'll say, because I don't want to forget, I know there's some needs. Armando's mom has some very serious health needs, and at this time their plans are to have, we don't know the details, but she's going to have open heart surgery. And there might, my understanding is there's some financial needs. I'm only pointing it out because it's obvious if I'm going to ask us to do this. And I think it'd be a good idea to help out which ways we can. A lot of this is stuff that's fallen on her shoulders, but also on Julia and Armando. We want to help them out. And whenever a family's going through something, I don't think it's not common for us to take up love offerings for non-members, but we all know her very well and care for her, care for, especially her son and her daughter-in-law very, very much. And I think it'd be a good thing for us to help out. And so I'd like this to take up a love offering Sunday afternoon. And so if you could come ready just to help out with where you can. Here's the thing, money's tight everywhere. And it's not getting any better. I don't, we know that we're able to help. Where we're able to help, God will make up the difference. So I wouldn't ask people to help outside of what they feel comfortable, but just give what they can and what you feel comfortable. Money is just it's going to continue to be tight. And so we just ask that you do whatever you can, whatever you feel led. That's the thing. I figure, you do what you feel comfortable doing. If someone did have an issue with taking up a love offering for a non-member, it's like, that's okay. And you don't have to help. But if you can, we'll take up a love offering Sunday afternoon. And on that end, let me just say, I don't know how to say this. I don't like the idea of gas money hurting people. We have a lot of people traveling a long ways. And on one hand, I know this, and I don't ever want to dissuade someone from, and I just taught a lesson less than a month ago on making sure that we're tithing, because if we're not tithing, if we're not doing right by God, we can't really expect his hand to be there helping us through these financial things, and just like forgiving, the way it's always worked with God is like, he is a just God, eye for an eye in almost every way. And when we give and we're financially liberal with our giving towards God, he's liberal with his giving towards us in his help. So I would never want to convince someone to give less tithing. I just don't want people's long drives and the gas prices that they're as bad as they are, they're going to get worse. And I don't know. I guess I just don't, I don't know. I'm trying to think how to say this because I don't know that we need to start taking up love offerings for driving for gas money. I don't know that that's a thing. I haven't been asked about it, but if, if someone's paying a lot more money to travel than me, which everybody is, I don't know that it would be so unfair that under these circumstances to consider that part of your tithing is what I'm trying to get at. But that being said, I don't ever want to try to convince someone to tithe less, but I would consider maybe, if I'm not making any sense, this is what I'm trying to say. And money's getting really, really tight. Let's not get tight with our giving towards God. However, if people are driving absorbent amounts to get to church and back, that maybe that might be a fair thing to consider part of your tithe. I don't know. Like I said, I'm more of the mind to always give, and whether money gets tight, give, and watch as God continues to bless. But I just know that this is going to start to be a strain on most likely on parts of our churches, parts of our families, and open up if your finances get tight. Talk to me, and if especially when you see gas prices reaching $7, $8, and what's that going to do to every aspect of life? It's going to get really crazy. It's going to get really bad, and hopefully they can find a fix for it soon. Otherwise, this is going to be a problem. And I don't know that Americans are in a position to suffer or go through this right now. I think COVID's hurt a lot of people. And Stephanie was pointing this out. I didn't even think about this. How many people who do work kind of part-time jobs, and the people that do a lot of things that don't pay well, and they're driving a decent amount, might just realize, you know what, I'm better off taking unemployment than driving and then taking that employment check. We know a lot of people were already doing that coming out of COVID, just not going back to work. So let's just pray for everything going on. A lot of crazy things, all the reports coming out of Eastern Europe is concerning, but the effect that it's having on the rest of the world is quite concerning. And even us here as Americans, the way that we're going to be being hit for it, I don't know. God's in control. Let's just make sure we put God first, serve God with our life, and not withhold our finances. Again, it's not what any of this is about, but let's do right by God, and God will get us through it all. Anybody else? I guess I kind of cut off all the prayer requests. Anybody else have a prayer request before we get on with our lesson? All right. If not, let's open our Bibles to the book of Jonah. And I mentioned on Sunday, I've been spending some time in the minor prophets. And so it might be a thing. I know Rick not long ago went through the minor prophets. He did a kind of a glance through, just 1 week per prophet, and kind of highlighted some aspects of those prophets and their ministries. And if I do spend some time going through some of these prophets, it will probably be in more detail. And as you saw on Sunday, I already preached one sermon that from one of them. And I don't know, we'll see how this all plays out. I don't know. Jonah came to mind, and I haven't touched on Jonah for so long. I thought, let's just go through it. It's one of those stories that it's like, I guess it's pretty short. It's not going to be a long series. I'm going to try to make 1 week per chapter, so it'll be about a month. But oftentimes we preach Jonah, and it's preachable because the story moves along quite quickly. But you can preach the whole story. You just highlight verses from each chapter, and you can move through quite quick, and that happens. But I don't know that in my life I've ever taught through it, which might give me opportunity to look at some points and some things that as a sermon you kind of glance through, because you don't have time to read all 4 chapters. So you kind of highlight some of these main points. The one concern is, after preparing the entire first chapter, which is a good percentage of it, 17 verses, the next 3 are 10 verse, 11 verse, really short. But after, a good percentage of it, and I didn't really come up with anything I had never seen before or heard before. So it's like, maybe, if I spend some time in Jonah, we can get something out of it that, if we spend some time there, something that we would normally kind of glance over. But a lot of the points from Jonah have been made before, and that's okay. Very great illustration. I mean, it's powerful. In fact, it's such a powerful illustration that it's the only one of its kind that Jesus Christ referred back to, and he pointed out about his life. And so the illustration, the picture here is so powerful that even Christ himself used it to reveal himself. And we do that. Sometimes we see other people would point to other characters. What we do as preachers do all the time, point to characters and stories, and we look for Christ in those stories, and we attribute it to something in Christ's life, especially his death or his resurrection or his second coming, But this is one of those illustrations, and the only one that I know of where even Christ himself said, pointing at Jonah and referred to him as a picture of Christ, of him himself, Jonah as a picture of him. And so it's a very powerful illustration. You hear a lot of things, a lot of debates about the life of Jonah and the story of Jonah. You know, a lot of historians, a lot of people that I don't know what word I'm looking for, but a lot of people like professors and stuff, people that study the Bible, they argue all sorts of things. There's a decent amount of people that argue that Jonah never even happened, that it's a story made up and it's taken from this and that and the other. But I think that's all kind of done away with by the fact that we'll see in just a second. We know he existed and Christ referred to him. So Jonah's a real story. The story about every part of Jonah is a real story. And even the part that a lot of people have a hard time with was that he was swallowed by a fish. And, whether we make him alive through that or dead, that's a debatable thing. And but a lot of people have a hard time with the idea. Sounds like a Disney story, being swallowed up by a fish and being alive in the fish. But of course, I'm referring to Pinocchio. Jonah came first. So if there's any semblance there, then whoever wrote Pinocchio, they were influenced by Jonah. Jonah's a real story. And I don't have a hard time. When we get to the second chapter, I guess we'll talk about it. Whether he lived through those 3 days and nights, whether he did die, I don't really care, because it's arguable, but the illustration is there, and the illustration is what matters most. And I will say, does God have the power to raise Jonah from the dead? Of course he does. Does God have the ability to preserve Jonah through the belly of the whale? Of course he does. So both are possible. And we can't use, one thing that people do, they have a hard time with stories like Noah's Ark is one, right? They point at it as like this, it's not even possible, therefore I can't believe in God, which is so backwards. It's such a backwards thinking. I can't believe in God because a story that only a miracle that only God could perform isn't possible. The logic is broken there. If God exists, then all things are possible. So Noah's Ark isn't even weird to me. It's a big boat. I've said this before. It's a big boat, and you can make them all the animals, small in size and maybe babies. A lot of things that can get all those animals in the boat. Jonah being swallowed, people have a hang up on it. If there is a God, which there is, then nothing is impossible. Not resurrection, which is impossible outside of God. Coming back from death, life coming from death, nor is, although, I'm getting way ahead of myself. Some things that I was going to put in next week's notes, but there is a story, I just think it's probably made up, of a man from South America. I don't know if it was Mexico or one of the other countries. I just remember South America. I got to look it up. Who claims to have been swallowed by a fish and lived in it 3 days until he escaped, or until it coughed him up. So I don't know if that's true, but there is a claim to it. There's a lot of crazy claims. So I don't know if there's no evidence, then I'm not going to use it as proof that it's possible. Anyways, I'm excited about getting into Jonah. I'm so excited. I wore my Jonah shirt. So let's get right in. Jonah 1:1. You're all wondering what is your Jonah shirt? I don't know. I have no clue. It's just my Jonah shirt from now on. Jonah 1:1. The word of the Lord came to Jonah, the son of Amittai, saying, we're going to be really slow getting out of the gates. It's not don't worry about it. This is the first few verses we're going to talk about, because it's setting up the rest of the story. And I want to just, while we have these things here, get everything we can out of this that I'm able to get out of it. And so the first few verses that we're going to be talking about Jonah real quick. We're going to talk about Nineveh for a little bit, and then we're going to just briefly mention Tarshish. It's not really too relevant to the story, so just a couple, aspects about it. But first things first, the Lord came to Jonah. Jonah was a prophet around 760 BC. That's around the time period. I just preached out of Amos. Amos and Jonah were prophets at the exact same time, so there's that. Both prophets during the reign of Jeroboam, the second Jeroboam, the northern king I talked about on Sunday, so I don't need to go over him too much. I don't need to go over him at all. So same time period, both prophets of the north. Amos was, obviously down in Samaria and having at it with the priest. Well, the priest was actually the one getting all upset at Amos about his prophesying about the judgment because of the false gods. And so that priest of the golden calf was trying to set him up to get in trouble. Jonah was a priest a little bit higher than that. You get, well, let me reference it real quickly. He's referenced during the life of, in 2 Kings, about the reign of Jeroboam. In 2 Kings chapter 14, you don't need to turn there. It says, he restored the border, this is speaking of Jeroboam. He restored the border of Israel from the entrance of Hamath as far as the sea of Arabah, according to the word of the Lord, the God of Israel, which he spoke through his servant Jonah, the son of Amittai, the prophet, who was of Gath-Hepher. And this city was a small little place in the southern border of Galilee, kind of just showing how wrong those scribes got it when they even said no, referring to the Old Testament, that no prophet ever came out of Galilee. Well, they were wrong. Jonah was one. Jonah came out of Galilee, and just barely, but Gath-Evan was, or Gath, whatever I just said, Gath, I have to say it now. Gath-Hepher. That's the word you should probably remember. Gath-Hepher. And a prophet during this time period, I ran the bases. We're good. Yep. Verse 2. Arise. This is the word of the Lord that came to Jonah. Arise, go to Nineveh, the great city, and cry against it, for their wickedness has come up before me. Nineveh. Nineveh was an Assyrian city, a major city, as it refers to here, a great city. It wasn't just yet. In fact, you could argue the capital was a larger area at this time and kind of made up of different provinces, and Nineveh was on the outskirts, but Nineveh technically became the capital of Assyria. It just happened about 60 years after this. At the time, though, Nineveh was this great city. And we'll read about this when Jonah gets there, but it says it's about 3 days walk. Although when people kind of mark it, probably 3 days to walk around it. But we know it took them 1 day to get to the heart of it. That's a big city. It wasn't so concentrated. It was it had some areas outside with a lot of space, a lot of land for different houses, but the whole city was a very, very large city. And again, major city in Assyria. And we know Assyria was an important adversary to Israel. Very common foe. We read about them regularly as we go through Kings and Chronicles. We see Assyria, they keep popping up. They're wicked. They're very, very wicked people, and did a lot of horrible things, very pagan in their worship, and had a lot of horrible religious practices, but they weren't very good to Israel, very cruel people. And we read about their activities in Israel quite a bit. We'll reference this in a second. The city from where Jonah was about 500 miles northeast, so a decent distance away, Assyria, Nineveh. We don't really need to do this, but I wrote it down, so we're going to. You can turn here with me to Genesis chapter 10. Keep your place, obviously. We're not going anywhere as far as Jonah is concerned, and I'm going to be there for the month. So keep your place. Genesis chapter 10. And this isn't too important to everything we're dealing with in the story, but again, as we're dealing with these individuals in this place, we might as well get all the information we can out of it. Genesis chapter 10, verse 6. The sons of Ham, of course, Ham was the son of Noah. The sons of Ham were Cush and Mizraim and Put and Canaan. The sons of Cush were Seba and Havilah and Sabta and Ramah and Sabtika. And the sons of Ramah were Sheba and Dedan. Now Cush became the father of Nimrod. He became a mighty one on the earth. So now Nimrod, the great grandson of Noah, this mighty man, mighty one on earth. He kind of an important character here. He was a mighty hunter before the Lord. Therefore it was said, like Nimrod, a mighty hunter before the Lord. The beginning of his kingdom was Babel and Erech and Akkad and Calneh and the land of Shinar. From that land, he went forth into Assyria and built Nineveh and Rahabath Ir and Kala. And is it not too important there? The resin between Nineveh and Kala, that is the great city. And so we see its origin being Nimrod, very ancient. This goes back to right after the flood. We get a few generations down, and Nimrod, very mighty man, founded a lot of places. He found Nineveh. And from that time, Nineveh grew to be this great city itself. Assyria was a very powerful people, and they would eventually, this is kind of, I guess maybe not the irony, but this is the whole story. Assyria, not Nineveh, but the people that they made of Assyria would eventually be the ones who were responsible for the destruction of that northern kingdom of Israel. About like 50 years, I have it written down, let me just refer to it. About 40 years after the story that we read here in Jonah, Assyria ended up coming down and marching down through Israel, and eventually in 721 they defeated Samaria and led the northern kingdom of Israel into captivity. Or they didn't really lead them into captivity so much; they scattered them. Some were taken captive, but a big portion of Israel was just scattered. Assyrian kingdom was destroyed in about 612 BC by the Medes. But not the Medes and the Persians. They were defeated and conquered by the Medes and the Babylonians. And a lot of this led right into the Babylonian Empire. So Assyria was a mighty power. And through this time period, you could say one of, if not the most powerful people and places. And Nineveh was one of their great cities, if not their greatest city. And so very predominant city at this time. And a few other things about Nineveh, about Assyria in general. They're pagan and very wicked, very cruel people, historically, very wicked, very cruel, and just mean. And the way that they would torture their enemies, there's a lot of things about that. Jonah, Israel in general, but Jonah specifically is what the story's about. He saw it. He saw their cruelties. He felt their cruelties. And so this led into him not really caring too much for Nineveh. And we could really make Jonah out to be a cold-hearted individual from these verses that we're about to read, but we really don't know. I don't like judging people, not in life, not in Bible. You know, it's like we judge Samson a whole lot for his stupid mistakes, but he's written about as a great man of faith. You read about Hebrews 11, he's mentioned there, you know? And so we sometimes pick on some of these prophets and the judges and kings that did wrong and messed up, but they're all humans and we don't get to hear the whole story. David himself messed up and he's mentioned as a man after God's own heart. We don't know what went into this. I don't know Jonah's life. We don't know what caused this hatred towards Nineveh, his hatred towards Assyria. But as you read through the history of Assyria and Israel, it's not that weird to think that there's a people who generation after generation plagued and brought harm upon Israel and probably left a bitter taste in a lot of Israelites' mouth. But on top of that, we don't know what Jonah himself experienced. There's a lot of weird things that people, you know, it's like, here's the thing, don't give this any credence because it's not in the Bible. Jewish tradition has Jonah being the son that was brought back to life by the widow, you know, that Elijah brought back that widow. And I think that's the one where he lay down on top of the boy and he did it a few times and the boy sprung up. Jewish history has Jonah being that boy. You know, maybe, who knows? There's a lot of things that do get passed down through history and things that seemingly like Nicodemus should have known about that he was, you know, as a teacher uneducated in. So I don't know how much of that's real. We know a lot of things get skewed and twisted over time. And we know by the time Christ came on the scenes, the Pharisees and Sadducees and the religious leaders, they had messed a lot of things up. They twisted a lot of things of God. Who knows how much they inserted and how much they took away. Give no credence to it. We don't, I'm only mentioning that because we don't know about Jonah's life. I don't know what went into this. What I do know is, man, he hated Nineveh. Let's keep reading. And we know that from the time we're a kid and we first hear the story. I'm mentioning that because I don't know that at any point I'm going to teach you something you haven't heard about this story from the time you were a kid. Nonetheless, a very important story. Verse 3, but Jonah rose up. He was told to go to Nineveh, but Jonah rose up to flee to Tarshish from the presence of the Lord. So he went down to Joppa, found a ship which is going to Tarshish from the presence of the Lord, mentioned twice there. He's told to go to Nineveh. And as I mentioned, it's about 500 miles, a great distance, northeast. And when he was told to go there, he didn't. He ran from the presence of God. He ran from God's instruction, and he went the opposite. Instead of going northeast, he went straight west. And Tarshish is all the way west as far as it's in Spain. And he wasn't just hopping a ship to, the other side of the sea. He was going as far west as there is on a map at the time, that was as west gets at the time. So he literally set out sail for the farthest direction, the opposite way he could possibly go, all the way 2,000 miles to Spain, to the port city, Tarshish. So we really start getting a lot of spiritual pictures that we talk about this. We hear about this story from the time we're a kid, but called to do one thing, called to do God's work one way, and got in a boat, started heading the opposite direction. Went below deck, got down there, and he felt pretty safe. And, kind of adding this in there, but I think at this point, he started to feel like he'd made it, Now you can't just teleport to Tarshish, but he did the legwork. He's on the boat. And you got to assume that I'm going to go to sleep. It's going to take some time to get there, but he's just going to kind of sleep through it, and got down the bottom boat. He felt safe enough, as we're about to read, that he fell asleep. And so I think he had kind of gotten secure in his place, in his plan, I should say, his plan of running the other way. He felt confident, like it had worked. He got to what's the city's name? We just read it, Joppa. And he got in the boat, went down below deck, and he did as much as he could. And again, I think he thought he'd done enough. He was running from the presence of God. And that's mentioned twice in verse 3 here. That's the troubling thought. Running from the presence of God. People still do that to this day, Jonah serves as a great illustration in many ways. But as people are called, as God is leading man, he will lead us if we allow him. Gives instruction, he gives guidance, he shares his will. And for whatever reason, I don't know what all goes into people's independent reasons of why God leads in one direction, why they want to turn and run the other way. I don't know. Sometimes God's plan for us can be a little scary. I know that firsthand. There's a long time that I was being called to the ministry, it wasn't really strong conviction, and I've shared it many times, but I just felt like that's what I was supposed to be doing. And that calling scared me. And, if we turn from God's will, we're going the opposite direction. And maybe it's not fear, but maybe it's just in life, I think more times than not, when people turn from God and his plan, it's just because they want something else. And God leads us into his truth, into his way, and he wants to lead us in our life. And when we turn, I don't know, it's pride a lot of times. We just want something else. And people do it. I'm sure we've all done it to some degree in some way. When God leading in one way, maybe we did it convincing ourselves that we were doing God's will. But, I don't know, we need to be an open people, willing to do whatever it is that God leads us and following God's plan. I mean, there's always a lot of talk on this topic of people moving. By the way, just real quickly, the association meeting topic for Friday afternoon is basically on the topic of the difficulties of living in California, more so also the concept of people leaving. And some people like me and Ryan Miller are very kind of a little bit bullheaded on this topic, about just the answer is no. But we want to be fair with the topic. And so they're going to obviously be presented with some fairness, recognizing that we shouldn't be a people who turn from God and run to Tarshish. That's my adding this in here, Obviously, that's going to be a major part of the meeting. We can't be a people, we shouldn't be running in fear. We shouldn't also be cashing in, It's not about people that came out west during the Great Depression weren't cashing in. They literally were starving to death and they're just trying to feed their children. So I don't think cashing in on our housing equity to live a more comfortable life is a calling of God's, although God can lead us in any which way. And I think that's the point of the meeting is let's be fair with the meeting. And I know the topic has been brought up from time to time in the church. Different families have brought it up at different times. And my thing has always been this and it'll always remain the same. We can't be seeking our own will. We need to seek God's will. We do that by not turning from the presence of God, but seeking his face. I just talked about that a couple weeks ago. And I would never ask, I can't think of anything more serious of a topic for a family than moving away from home, family, and above all, church. It's a very risky thing. God can be in it. God's led people. People have moved. It's fair. People have moved. And people have joined churches in other states. And they have thrived. And they've done well. The key thing is that we're not fleeing from the presence of God. That's it. Well, if anything, it needs to be God's leadership, If God puts it on our heart to move, I would think that we'd be people who would heed that. It's important that we do. We want to go where God leads, and that's the important thing. We just don't want to be a people who are, for any other reason other than God. Let me just say this one last thing, just as the most important thing. The most important thing in the decision of something so great, but any decision, as we seek God's will in life, and this goes back to my sermon again, few weeks back. It's not just done by asking God to make it clear, which that's part of the prayer. That's my prayer for me, my prayer for anyone that's ever in an important decision. And that can be living, schooling, church, marriage, so many important decisions that we're asking God to make it obvious, make it as obvious as possible, because I'm a moron and I get things wrong. I need him to make it clear. But how we find God's will is the most important thing is that we're drawing close to God. Jonah got it wrong because he turned from God. And this is an important thing. If we want to make important decisions, the most important thing is that we are drawing closer to God. We don't make spiritual decisions when we're not living spiritually. We don't make godly decisions when we're not living godly. We're going to make carnal decisions. We can't ask God to be clear in his leadership if we're not living right. It won't work. And in fact, we'll probably find out that we made a mistake and we ran to Tarshish when we were to be going to Nineveh. We need to be drawing close to God at all times, obviously. But I look at major decisions as pivotal moments in your life to say, I need to be doing everything I can to draw as close to God as possible. Jonah ran from God. He turned from the presence of God. And I hope I didn't sound like I'm plugging in. In fact, I'm trying to be very open-minded on this subject more than I've been. I just want God's people. I just want my church because I care so much for you to be making important decisions and make these important decisions through God's will. That we're finding God's will and we're letting him lead us. If that means going to Nineveh, then let's go to Nineveh. If that means staying in Israel, let's stay in Israel. We need to find God's will. In this case, God told him to go to Nineveh. I told you we'd be really long in the first 3 verses, but now we can, that's about half my notes. So we'll be fine. We can get through a lot of the story at this point. I just want to set the stage about these different places. But I don't know what goes into why. I mean, I think in this case, I kind of know what's going on in Jonah. I don't know why people always run. I don't know what goes into people's decision to run from God's presence or God's will or God's leadership in life. It's probably a very difficult question that's different in most cases. But when we make plans separate from God's, God is not in them and God does not bless them. In fact, we see in illustrations like this where God works against our plans. When our plans conflict with the plans of God, he not only doesn't bless, he will curse. Absolutely. And my thing is, okay. Yeah, God will curse it. And praise God that he does. You know what I mean? That's God's way. If he doesn't, that's how he got Jonah back. That's how he brought Jonah back, to get him going right back in the right direction, to do the right thing. And so thank God that he disciplines us and that he corrects us, as we've talked about. Talked a little bit about that on Sunday, going through Amos. God curses Jonah's plans. They weren't going to work. And like we read through Amos, it's a terrible thing when God lets it work. That means he's letting us go. Verse 4, the Lord hurled a great wind on the sea, and there was a great storm on the sea, so that the ship was about to break up. And let's read one more verse. Then the sailors became afraid, and every man cried to his God, and they threw the cargo which was in the ship into the sea to lighten it for them. But Jonah had gone below into the hold of the ship, lain down and fallen asleep. I don't think he went down during the storm. I think he just never woke up. He felt so at ease and so at peace with his decision. And I think maybe there was a little bit of storm brewing when he first fell asleep. I don't know if it wasn't his way trying to escape it. I don't know. We don't have details here. But one thing there's some things we do know. Jonah's disobedience, it didn't just affect Jonah. And it's just life. When we mess up our service to God, we affect everyone around us. When people fall out of church, it's not just their life. It's my life. I'll do whatever I want. It's your spouse, it's your children, it's your grandchildren, and who knows how many generations you could be lost to the work, to the Lord, because of our disobedience. It affects people. It affects those around us. And in life in general, when we sin and we're not doing right, we affect people around us. The Bible says, "I'll bless those that bless you. I'll curse you that curse you." Yeah, it's maybe not the great. It doesn't work at all. But there's an effect that we have on others and that they have on us. And God, it does work. God blesses those around us and whom bless us, and he curses those. Our presence affects other people. And in a like way, when we're doing right, we affect others in a good way. Does a church not get blessed when someone's on fire and they're growing and they're doing great things and they're bringing great things to the church, by way of devotional or just hard efforts and witness and bringing lost people? Of course, we bless the church and those around us when we're on fire and we're doing right, but we also bring down those around us. How much more so when a man of God isn't leading his household the way he should? He can devastate his house, and a woman as well, a wife. When she's not living the life that God's called the woman to live in support of the husband, how she can affect the husband, how the parents affect the children. Of course, these things can work this way. Our disobedience doesn't just affect those around. It doesn't just affect us. It affects those around us. Jonah serves as a great illustration of that. The crew starts panicking, and I don't know. It seems like Jonah's not aware yet, right? I don't know. Based on the verses that we just read, I don't think anyone's going to sleep in this storm. But again, I don't know if he's trying to escape from it. I think he's probably more just relieved to be gone, and was so relieved to not have to go to Nineveh that he fell asleep. One other illustration here. I think sometimes ignorance is bliss in life, especially in regard to sin. Be innocent as doves, Sometimes it's good to not know what something is. It's good to not know what something looks like. It's good to be ignorant of certain things, of a lot of things in this world. Some just horrible things that you can't unsee, And you just got to be smart when you're a kid, and you get, anxious to look at some really stupid videos. And, there's a video that I'll never get out of my head from when I was a kid that of a guy being beheaded. I'll never be able to unsee it, It'll stay with me for the rest of my life. And you can't unsee things. You can't unexperience things. You can't unlearn things. But, because in that case, it's good to be ignorant. But concerning God, it is not a good thing to bury our head in the sand, to pretend like God's not hard at work or God's not trying to reveal himself to us. And sometimes our flesh does that. We want We want to pretend like God's leadership isn't where it is, or that everything's okay, that I'm okay, that the situation is okay. We want to be ignorant, but certainly that our flesh does that. But when it comes to the things of God, ignorance is not bliss. It's very dangerous. Verse 6, the captain approached him and said, "How is it that you are sleeping? Get up, call on your God. Perhaps your God will be concerned about us so that we will not perish." This is great advice. Whenever we're sleeping, when we're not doing right by God, when we're supposed to be doing something God's called us to, and we're trying to sleep it off, we're trying to sleep it away. It's great when we're sleeping on God. It's great advice. Wake up and call upon your God. It should just be the advice to anyone that's spiritually sleeping, on God, and they're calling. Wake up. What good advice? Wake up and call on your God. Pray to your God. And at this point, these guys are freaking out. They're throwing everything overboard, trying to lighten the ship. A heavy ship breaks on heavy waves. We see that. There's video. I don't know if you've ever seen ships literally break in half on these big waves, and they come down and it can break the ship in half. It's not common, but it does happen. Heavy ships have heavy, come down hard. Light ships can navigate these storms a little bit easier. So they're throwing stuff overboard, and they're freaking out. They're willing to try anything, Maybe you got the God that matters. They're willing to try anyone's God. Let's keep reading. Each man, do we have time to get to this? It's okay if we don't, but I'd like to. So the thing is, I know me. I'd rather stop at a good point. Verse 8, verse 7. Each man said to his mate, "Come, let us cast lots so that we may learn on whose account this calamity has struck us." So they cast lots, and the lot fell on Jonah. Lots, we read this. The word casting lots is in the Bible like 46 times. We should read it. It's in the Old Testament. It's even in the New Testament. And it's a thing that people did with these stones, these little smooth stones. There might be, I've heard of it. There's another system that people use sticks, but the common one historically would be these smooth stones. They had these engravings on it. And I don't know that anyone fully knows how it works. I've never been able to find someone that can really tell exactly, but they know the concept is to cast lots. And you ever seen those, like, I don't know, it's like in Harry Potter, that one woman, right? They had the bowl, and then everything was random in there. And then there was a sign based on what was in the bowl. And that was the woman with the big glasses. I forget, but this concept is in movies. It's in other religions, I think I saw something similar in Pirates of the Caribbean. Nonetheless, you get these stones and you cast them, and then you read them, right? It tells you something. And I don't know if each person casts. There's a system there. We know that they also cast lots regarding the replacement of Judas. But I don't know if that was the same type of lots. It seemed that may have been more of a decision making, and it was an expression used. But in any case, cleromancy is what it's called. It's all over the Bible. It's all over in other religions. And I don't know why they did it so much if it didn't work. Although I will say, I don't think that's a good way to live life. Don't be going through life like, "God, if you want me to go there, make all the lights green." I don't know that that's a sign. If you don't want me to go there, turn the light red. Well, I don't know. Just, figure out whether going there. I don't even know what I'm talking about. I don't think that's a good way to serve God or live life, is leaving things up to chance. However, it worked here because they cast the lots and they read them, and it pointed at Jonah. Jonah was the one. So, I don't know exactly all that goes into its specifics. And again, like I said, I know that there were sticks involved at times, but stones seem to be the way it works. And so they cast lots. It pointed at Jonah. Verse 8, then they said to him, "Tell us now, on whose account has this calamity struck us? What is your occupation?" They start asking him all the questions. What is your occupation? Where do you come from? What is your country? From what people are you? And I read, one point, and there's an individual claiming that when they asked Jonah about praying to his God, that they knew who it was. I don't think they did, because verse 8 makes it clear that they didn't know anything about Jonah. And when they found out it was him, they wanted to know everything about what's causing. Here's the thing. I find that these men, these sailors, act I get a lot of good examples out of these sailors on the way that people should react to problems. Jonah, the prophet, seems to be acting opposite of what he should be doing, and then we get things like this where, like, when there's trouble brewing, something causing you a heartache, you should want to figure out what's causing it and how to get rid of it. What's going on? How do I fix it? What is this all about? And then Jonah's in the bottom of the deck trying to sleep it off, trying to sleep it away. These men are trying to do something about it. And when they find out Jonah's got something to do with it, they want to know all about it. They want to, again, they seem to have a bigger interest in correcting this problem than Jonah does. He answers the question in verse 9. He said to them, I am a Hebrew, and I fear the Lord God of heaven, who made the sea and the dry land. We're going to stop there because I know I'm going to, with a few minutes left, I won't have time to get down to the end. This is speculation here, but it kind of makes sense to me, as these men are pagans, and these men are looking out, maybe not pagans, but seem to be pagans. And they have all these different gods as they're praying to their gods. I'm sure Jonah heard them, and I'm guessing it would make sense to pray to the god of the sea, Poseidon or something, it makes sense to pray to God of land because you're asking to get the land. So it makes sense to pray to the God of the sea and the God of the land. I think Jonah probably heard that because he's probably doing his first really good thing here is he's telling them who he is. I'm a Hebrew. I fear the Lord God of heaven. He's the one who made these things that you worship and serve, these gods. My God made these things. And I remember a story I heard. I think it was in Hawaii. It's a story my dad tells. It only makes sense that it was Hawaii. My dad was out, and I think he went out with George E. and some of his family, and I just don't know why I wasn't there. It's the only thing about this story. In any case, my dad's out in the ocean. They're waiting for the next set of waves. And maybe this is a story. My dad used to be a surfer, believe that or not, when he was young. So maybe it goes back to his youth. It just makes more sense that it was from Hawaii, because a lot of people over in Hawaii, they still worship. Pele is still a thing. You go to the volcano and they still have sacrifices burning there to Pele. In any case, this guy was bragging to my dad about this being his God. This is my God. I serve it. I worship it every day. And long story short, I guess, I don't know if it's long. This is the only part I remember about it. So my dad's like, oh yeah, my God made this, see, and how true. And I guess there's opportunity here. I guess that's what I like about this. First thing he does smart. In the midst of all this going on, he does find a way to own up to who he is, to point at his God, and to point at the power of his God, and to be a testimony. And it does take root in these guys' life, and we'll see. They saw some things, but it certainly helped that there is a man pointing to God in the midst of all this storm, saying, this is my God's doing, and my God is the one that created all things. This we should always be using. There's horrible things going on in the world, and there has been a lot of crazy things. It might get worse, but as we see through history, when things get stirred up, we see people asking questions, and we need to start looking at all the things going on in the world. The last couple of years, what's ahead, things that are ahead of us, and just make sure we're people who aren't fearing these things, but we're using these things to point at our God, saying, "This is my God," and try to hope that we can use the situations that we are in to make a difference and to reveal our Lord to some people. Let's go ahead and stand to be dismissed. I almost walked down. I'm not going to walk down. We'll stay right here. Any last words? Any prayer requests? Shiva.
I forgot to mention Rick, 'cause he come home from work and his back was hurting really bad, so just keep him.
Okay.
And then my brother James, his daughter, Megan, she's young, she's married, made some bad, choices in life right now, and they just lost custody of their 4 children. She just had a baby this past week, so they took on 4 of them. So just keep them in prayer that they get their life on track.
Megan's your niece?
Yes.
Okay. Just remember Triva's niece, that her life get going in the right direction. Lost her kids to Child Protective Services, I'm assuming. Let's remember that. And then Rick, who's down, his back's not doing great. I didn't think he was gone today, but I figured, well, he's not here. He must be Must be up north. Anybody else? We're all good. We're all set. Okay. Armando, will you dismiss us, please?
And Father, I ask and pray that you be with those who are not here with us, Lord, and you do about prayer requests that we mentioned today here and all our sister churches, Father, that you do with them. Lord. We ask and pray that you please our son Chris throughout the rest of this week and you bring us back here safely all together here on Sunday, Lord. We ask and pray that you please forgive us our sins in Jesus' name.
Amen.